Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine War news update, the first part thereof for the 24th of September 2025. And my goodness, there's a lot to go through. It's going to be another bumper one. I'm going to struggle to get this done in a digestible time frame. So let's get stuck into it. Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply. Find them in the description below, linked there. Now, we have 2 aircraft added to this. This was a claim that a base was hit, was it 2 nights ago? Anyway, we've now seen 4 helicopters, 2 B-12 planes, seaplanes, and then 2, we don't know what planes they are yet. There's no information on open source intelligence to confirm or inform us of what was hit, but Ukrainian General Staff are happy that they've been presented evidence for the destruction of 2 more aircraft. So there's 4 fixed-wing planes and 4 helicopters destroyed in 4 nights, really. 3 nights, actually, because the initial claim was yesterday. So that is amazing. Then, of course, we've got all the destruction of air defense, and which I think is connected. So the destruction of air defense radars means that air bases are much more vulnerable today, as Crimea and the occupied territories are being denuded of their defenses against drones and missiles. So the drones and missiles, like a snowball effect, will eventually be able to take out more and more stuff. I mean, last night we're hearing that Crimea was targeted in a quite wide-scale manner, although there's nothing coming out about this yet. But we know that Belbek was targeted, which has an airbase, and Sevastopol was targeted. There were claims from the Russians that the Ukrainians were throwing flamingos and all sorts at the Russians. So we're yet to see whether anything took place there, but I imagine it did. These are the sorts of things that emerge as the days go by. 970 personnel, so that's just shy of 1,000, just in case you don't know the order of numbers. So 970 is just less than 1,000. 2 tanks, 3 troop-carrying AFVs, 43 artillery systems. So again, high in that category, even though we have very few tanks and AFVs taken out. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 130 vehicles, I think shows that the Russians are still attacking in major ways. So it's fairly significant personnel losses and very significant vehicles and fuel tank losses, 4 pieces of special equipment. And then we have usual sort of picture elsewhere. So, okay, on a personnel front, here's just an anecdote, admittedly, but we keep seeing stuff like this. So anecdotes eventually do become data when there's enough of them. Russian occupier Alexei Smirnov here has a message for the front. Quote, "Guys," says this soldier who's not looking in a good way, "guys, don't come here to fight in Ukraine. Think about your children. This isn't our war. There were 20 of us. I'm the only one left. The rest are 200s, which means the rest are dead. Cargo 200 is dead, 300 is injured, and 500 is at deserters, I think. Anyway, you won't hear, and therefore I think maybe 400s POWs, and those are the codes. You won't hear this kind of patriotism on Russia 1, as in the TV show. So, and these shows then, there's a blurred image there of lots of dead Russians. So, there is some evidence to what he's saying. And then we have here in Pokrovsk, border guards captured a Russian crane operator who signed a contract expecting to run an excavator, a digger, after a stroke in August. So this guy had a stroke in August. He was then sent to storm positions by September. So he's quite an elderly crane operator, was supposed to be driving a digger, had a stroke, was sent back to the front line, and then was by September, shortly after a stroke, and then was captured. So we remember, I was talking about abduction yesterday. Inference to the best explanation. So, and this works both ways. You have 2 claims. 1, the Russians are amassing lots of troops. 2, the Russians are not signing up many contracts, only 12,500 a month, which is true. And then you look at something like this, it's like, okay, if they are signing up huge amounts of people, why are they sending people who've just had a stroke, excavator diggers, to the front lines? This doesn't look like the situation you would have if the Russians had lots of troops. And the troops they do have are getting killed in quite large numbers. So, yeah. Then we have Dmitry Rogozin here, who is a Russian senator from Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia. So you've got a pro-Russian Ukrainian, or a Russian senator in occupied Ukraine, saying that the front line has reached a deadlock and de facto said that the Russian army was not capable of great advances. So that's not looking good. Then we have Russian military blogger Anatoly Radov confirms Russian forces lost Nikhanarivka in the Dobropilya axis, but refutes Ukrainian control over Novotoretska. So there were claims last night that the Ukrainians had taken control of Novotoretska, which is just here in this neck. You got Boykivka here and Novotoretska, and apparently, according to some sources, the Ukrainians control both of those and have now fully cut off this large neck here, above which you've got the bunny ears, right? So you've got two areas of the Ukrainians surrounding the Russians. Possibly here, a Russian blogger says they don't control Novotoretska, despite the presence of the 425th Assault Regiment, the Ukrainian regiment there. But even if this is true, another circlement now seems inevitable, says no report. So again, things are not looking good there. Things are very tough on the front line. I did a big live stream last night with Greg Terry. Go and check it out. It's still relevant, obviously, now. Lots of talk about Donald Trump's pivot. I then did a breaking news update on that pivot. We'll talk about that in a bit. But he was talking about how it's horrific on the front lines. Like, drones are everywhere and you can't move, really. And we'll hear about this actually from Valery Zelenskyy in a minute. But he was just saying, look, 100 kilometers from the front line and you are driving down roads that are covered in drone nets. Drones are just an issue for both sides. It is hell. Fighting is hell there and you can't move for drones. That's going to be the same, as I say, for both sides. Now, Zelenskyy says, he's come out and said, look, practice has shown that an isolated tactical breakthrough in Kursk did not bring Ukraine the necessary success. He should know more than I do. I actually think that was a success, but it was untenable in the end. But it was never going to be tenable forever, right? Unless you really do expand that neck and then dig yourselves in. But I was never looking at that as a permanent thing. But it was eventually beaten back because Rubicon, partly because the Russians got a very decent drone unit, rather like Magyar's Birds. They copied Magyar's Birds and produced this drone unit that's now operating more extensively along the front line, just as Magyar's Birds are too. So they're trying to copy, and they then hit the supplies to the Ukrainians in that area, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we know all this. He says, it is obvious that Ukraine's victory today is depriving Russia of the opportunity to impose its conditions through war. This is a minimum program for survival. So Ukraine is doing enough to stifle Russia from being able to achieve their objectives. Russian troops defending there managed to take advantage of both technological and tactical advantages, and over time not only did not allow tactical breakthrough to develop into an operational success, this is Kursk, but also carried out tactical advancements themselves, also without operational success. General picture of the fighting is based on the fact that a large concentration of people, even in defense, is absolutely impossible. Any increase in the number of personnel in positions will instantly lead to their destruction by FPV and artillery strikes, which will be supplemented by drones. And I would add aviation. In other words, like, if you're going to move quite a lot of troops into a place to consolidate the control of that place, then you have large troop concentrations. Now, in the old days of large troop concentrations, I guess, you didn't have satellite imagery. I mean, talking World War II, and you'll be trying to pummel things with artillery, but you're using like forward observers to do that, using binoculars, and it's not going to be as accurate. Nowadays, you've got satellite imagery, you've got drone imagery, reconnaissance drones, you've got FPV drones with their own reconnaissance capabilities, right? So you can see where you're going, and you've got much more accurate artillery. Then you've got guided glide bombs that can be released from ever so far back, and then you've got HIMARS, and then you've got all of these different weapons that if you start getting troop accumulations, you just get absolutely shellacked. And even if you have small troop accumulations and dugouts, FPV drones are flying into dugouts. So, like, front lines is just really freaking difficult for infantry to control and for sides to attack and then maintain control. It's just... Greg was saying last night that everything's just a bit of a grey zone because of basically drones, etc., etc. Anyway, this is kind of what the solution is saying. Thanks to the tactic of covering our positions with a large number of assaults by small groups, the front is constantly moving, unfortunately, in our direction. So he's saying, the enemy is covering our positions with a large number of assaults. So they get over this with just huge numbers of people, but of course that's not sustainable, as we are presently seeing. That means that everything's a bit of a grey area and constantly moving, because you've got all of the drone stuff as talked about, but then you've got motorcycles and then troops, and then a positional deadlock on the front really exists, but there is a steady tendency to break out of it precisely from Russia. In other words, it's generally deadlocked, but it will grind forward in a very slow manner. And that's essentially what we've seen right along the front line for, I'd say, 6 months, but actually, ever since the counter offensives of 2022. The worst thing that we are waiting for, further complication of the situation. This is possible due to the development of AI technology. So the worst thing is going to be AI technologies, which will lead to the appearance of first semi and later fully autonomous strike systems, which will bring a higher threat to humans on the battlefield. And this is fairly scary for infantry, because you're going to be able to, I presume, set out swarms of drones to just go and take out the enemy. And then you don't have to control them. First of all, you'll be controlling them in swarms, but then you're just like press go, and they'll fly off, and then they go and do their thing, and they'll just hunt out the enemy. And maybe it'll get to a point where, okay, you might lose signal as it goes into, but if it's an FPV drone, you won't be able to fly into a dugout and maybe be precise enough to fly itself into the dugout and into corridors and then strike deep in a dugout. The only way, and Zelenskyy has been saying this, he said, right, remember that Economist article ages ago when he kind of left and became an ambassador, but he was talking about you need to have a technological breakthrough, and then you need to hammer home that breakthrough. And possibly Ukraine is able to do this. I don't know who's ahead in AI research, but I have heard that Ukraine have been testing out AI swarms or drone swarms with up to 25 drones, but potentially up to 100. We haven't seen this. I think they've probably kept it operational very secretive, operationally very secretive, but there are claims that they have been playing around with swarms. And if we start seeing that on the front line, then that will, but both sides are going to be trying to do this, of course. That will be, there will be a fight for who can get ahead of the curve in AI and in swarms. But it will bring, naturally, it's going to bring a higher threat to humans on a battlefield. The only way out today is to invent, as soon as possible, a means of system that will increase the survivability of personnel. All this is directly related to issues of mobilization and training. As of today, the use of strike drones causes almost 80% of losses among personnel and equipment. That's where it's at, drones. Now, equipment losses, we have a Ukrainian high number of losses, 42 in total. I think that shows that the Ukrainians are attacking certain places like Pokrovsk-on-Sumy. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's of course, it's bad that the Ukrainians are losing this, but you lose this stuff when you're attacking, which I think is a good sign that you're attacking. Now, the Russians have lost 37, but remember, they do not, or Oryx and Yakub Yanovsky here, they do not count motorcycles, buggies, SUVs, unarmored vehicles, so on and so forth, quads. So the Russians are using a lot of those. So we go back to this list. Remember, they lost 130 of those vehicles. None of those 130 essentially will be on Yakub Yanovsky's list, apart from trucks, apart from UAVs and Kamazes and whatnot. Only 2 tanks, only 3 troop-carrying AFVs, which that means the Russians are simply not using these vehicles. Okay, so the Ukrainians are, to a greater extent, I would argue. A couple of tanks here, T-64's got a BMP-2, M113, Banvan BVS-10, that's the articulated tracked vehicle that comes from Sweden. Then we have your typical whole host of mobility vehicles. So really you've got, I don't know, I'm guessing about 15 mobility vehicles there. That shows they're getting troops from A to B, losing those vehicles. That's going to be activity in and around Pokrovsk, where they're going to be hit by Russian drones. But they are moving to try and cut off the Ukrainians, and they'll be using a lot of these vehicles. Then you've got command post vehicle. That's an old M113 variant, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. We have then some drones. We've got Bogdana 4.0. That's the latest self-propelled howitzer from the Ukrainians. One of those has been destroyed. We have a Telar transporter reactor launcher and radar for the Buk M1. That's going to hurt. And a 366 ST-68U surveillance radar. That'll hurt a little bit as well. And then some other bits and pieces. Okay, the Russians here, They have a T-90M tank. That's a latest Russian tank, really, that they are using. 3 tanks in total. Then we have some AFVs thrown in there, and a couple of mobility vehicles, recovery vehicle, and then we get down to some serious kit here. Okay, so you've got 5 90 20 250 transloaders. These are for the Iskander. We're going to come on to this. This is a really big hit that the Ukrainians succeeded with, but that's actually back in August. And then another Iskander vehicle. So you've got transloaders, and I don't know if you've got launchers, but you got all the vehicles around the Iskanders. Take them out and you can't fight Iskanders. And Iskanders are an absolute mare for the Ukrainians. And then you've got a bunch of other trucks and vehicles. You've got a Mi-8 transport helicopter thrown in there as well. And then another Iskander, that might be the launcher there, 920mm. Yeah, so that's the launcher. So you do have the launcher, which is destroyed. You've got 6 other vehicles that are basically associated with the Iskander. As mentioned, we're going to come on to that in just a second. All of that stuff, I think, is really high value equipment, and helicopter too. Minus Russian positions, so they are getting dugouts routinely hit at the moment. I think the big difference for the Ukrainians, the last, I would say, 2 months, they have been using medium range up to 200 kilometer drones. I keep talking about this every day. They are really severely hitting the Russian near rear, and that is including command posts. So a lot of officers are being taken out. We are seeing troop accumulations taken out. We are seeing even people like possibly Saldo, the head of the Kherson occupied administration, being killed in a strike using these drones in dachas in Crimea. We are seeing radars and air defenses. We are seeing planes and helicopters. This is a very, I think, rich moment, a purple patch for the Ukrainians at the moment. Here's another example. This is Sonyeshnik reporting that the Air Force successfully struck a command post of the invaders in southern Ukraine. It included it's a command post and a drone operation. It doesn't say it here, but it's otherwise being reported. There was a drone team as well. So this is another big hit from Su-27 dropping guided glide bombs, GBU-62. These are very powerful bombs, really, or pretty powerful bombs. In addition to the command post, it hit a concentration of enemy personnel. I've also heard drone operators as well, so really significant. Okay, here is, and this happened back in August, by the way, in late August. So it's only just coming out now, but Russians have someone from Russia's released these photos, which is very revealing. Now, the strike of 14 Ukrainian drones hit the Molkino training ground. So this goes back to these medium range drones, and they're using a lot of them. We have seen 19 drones hit one base, one miss, so 20 drones sent to the base that absolutely took out this base. We have seen FSB personnel taken out, 8 officers. We've seen 17 officers in another place. We've seen troop accumulations here. We've seen Koronova and 155th taken out there. All sorts of stuff is happening every night at the moment. And I just get the sense that the Russians are really hurting. Now, that's maybe a bunch of copium on my part, but the evidence is there. It's emerging. Here we have several Iskander launchers was destroyed. Well, Jakub Yanovsky says 1 launcher and then 6 other vehicles. A Panzer S1 was damaged in this as well. A warehouse along with other vehicles were affected. So this appears to be an Iskander launching set up with a launcher and a whole bunch of vehicles, potentially a Panzer S1 as well. Although we didn't see that added to Jakub Yanovsky's list, I don't think, but he's certainly looking at the same data here. No, there's no Panzer S1 added to there, but the claim is from several that was evidence here. Special Kherson Cat says the aftermath of an attack, 14 strike drones were used on this assault on Molkino. 6 transport loading vehicles of the Iskander missile system were destroyed, while a Panzer S1 also sustained damage. So that's damage rather than destroyed. Additional photos of the same strike. Yeah. So good news there for the Ukrainians. Here, 5 transloaders and 1 Iskander launcher. So that's more what Jakub Yanovsky says. On the grounds of a poultry farm near Shemakovo in Kursk region, Front Intelligence Insight found that strike took place between August the 8th and 13th, rather than later in the month as first reported. Originally, it was claimed that the strike took place in Molkino, Krasnodar Krai. Later geolocation analysis pointed that the vehicles were positioned on the grounds of a civilian farm in Kursk, so absolutely miles away from where the other two sources were saying. Molkino in Krasnodar, which is kind of the other side of the Sea of Azov. Here, they're saying it's actually up in Kursk, north of Sumy. Later geolocation analysis pointed that the vehicles were positioned on the grounds of a civilian farm in the Kursk region, approximately 100 kilometers from the border. Tactical markings on the vehicles along with the license plates helped pinpoint the military district and identify the unit as a 448th Missile Brigade, which is based in Kursk. Credit for the geolocations goes to etc. etc. Additional photos suggest the destruction of 2 more vehicles, at least one of which may have been a command vehicle, while some reports claim a Pantsir air defense system was also destroyed. Our team has no conclusive evidence to confirm it. So that goes back to Yanovsky saying no Pantsir, or not indicating one, but these two guys saying there was a Pantsir, probably using the same kind of data. So maybe not a Pantsir, but a lot of equipment taken out there very successfully. Okay, then we have unmanned systems force operators destroying 2 Tor M2 air defense systems worth $50 million, $25 million a pop. This is some 15 kilometers away. This is a 412th Nemesis SBS regiment. Interception range of air targets is up to 15 kilometers. The cost of the new system is I think that's the Tor can hit at 15 kilometers. So it's sort of just creeping into the medium range air defense system rather than being a short range. Or VSHORAD, very short range air defense system. The cost of the new system is approximately 25 million. Yeah, so 2 of those taken out in that footage. That's very useful. Here is a bit of footage that I found pretty fascinating. It's a spectacular demolition of Russian positions. So this, as you can see, it's probably got a bunch of aerials on the top. I'm not sure. Whenever you have something high like a mobile phone mast or a pylon or a chimney, you end up getting surveillance and comms equipment whacked up there, because obviously, you know, that's advantageous for signals. But a Ukrainian drone comes up to this chimney and drops a TM62 anti-tank mine in it. So you can see it dropping it there, and then it gets out of dodge. These definitely look, those are all kind of radar aerials and whatnot at the top. So they want to get rid of all that setup. How do they do that? Well, drop an anti-tank mine down the bottom of this chimney, and wow, it doesn't just blow the bottom, it actually makes the whole thing just explode. Like the integrity of the entirety of that chimney just then disappears. It just poof, that is gone, and it can't be used for comms and surveillance and whatnot. So that is a good, that's a success for the Ukrainians there. But I don't know. We shouldn't like to watch destruction, but sometimes it's quite satisfying when it's Russian. Okay. Yuri Butasov is reporting what you suspected for a while, JP. So Johnny John sent this to me. I've been talking about how FPV drones are now containing incendiary stuff because they are hitting vehicles and you are seeing fire spread on them immediately. I've been saying this for some time now. A couple of you have been questioning that, but I'm like, no, definitely incendiary liquid or something. And it's been evidenced not only in hitting vehicles, but we've seen it on towed howitzers. Suddenly they're covered in fire, and even dugouts and whatnot. Well, Yuri Butasov is reporting what you suspected for a while, JP, the use of ammunition in drones containing an incendiary cocktail, napalm. So apparently they are using napalm to destroy bits of, all sorts, fragmentation bombs. Incredible footage of roasted Russian pork. Well done here. 18 Russian attack aircraft burned alive by new munitions napalm. Attack aircraft, I don't know if that's drones or whatnot. Attack aircraft is really stormtroopers. Okay, so Google translated the word. Okay, so yeah, they are 18 humans then were taken out by napalm. Pretty nasty. Right, it appears that Russians are dropping quite frequently in Russia, as in people are being thrown out windows or being found suicided. Igor Sushko reports that in Russia, a high-level St. Petersburg government official Boris Avakian was charged with defrauding the state of 4.2 billion, that's $50 million, 4.2 billion rubles in customs fees. Asked if for a smoke break in the courthouse, and he fled to the Armenian consulate. He has been found dead, though it's another suicide. Yeah, so he's been found dead. Then we hear an oligarch seen as one of Putin's permitted rich guys has been arrested. Alexei Bobrov, known as the garbage king of the Trans-Urals, was previously investigated in the EU for bribery to obtain his Austrian passport. He's now accused of fraud by the Russian state. Russian media have suddenly been briefed to reveal the extent of Bobrov's wealth, owning luxury property in Moscow, vineyards in Italy, and multi-million townhouses in London. They could have just read last month's report by the Insider on oligarchs. Well, you're starting to see a net close for some of these people who might have thought they had impunity to go about doing their oligarchy sort of thing. So being arrested, but also someone else must have upset Putin. Viktor Momotov, the chairman of Russia's Council of Judges, is said to have assets of over $100 million. He's been arrested and accused of collaborating with criminal figures and laundering real estate. Looking at the last two stories and some I didn't report, I'm certain there's an aggressive shakedown of the disgustingly wealthy by Putin. Obviously, Russia desperately needs money, and so maybe shaking down these oligarchs is a way of getting that money. As Tim White says, who desperately needs cash to prop up the economy. Those who refuse to donate are arrested. Next choice sees assets or window falling. So there we have window falling. So people are either falling. People are disappearing because of suicide, scare quotes suicide, or they're being arrested on corruption charges. And of course, we know that they have deets on pretty much anyone in Russia. Everyone can be done for corruption because everyone is corrupt. And it's just, you're waiting for your time. FSB will have compromat on everyone, including their own military leaders. We've seen a number of military leaders who have been arrested, fallen out of favor for one reason or another, and get arrested for corruption because they've got stuff on anyone and everyone. Okay, distant strikes, a lot in this section, and my goodness, I've been going a long time already. Okay, drone attack on Ukraine. 152 drones launched, 126 intercepted. So a fairly typical sort of 26 drones getting through. Strikes recorded in 7 locations. Debris fell in 2 more. Last night, while I was doing a live, it was looking really horrific in Kharkiv. Substation blown up, and it was apparently getting pummeled. Russian channels are posting massive explosions said to have happened in Kharkiv that then led to blackout there. But there's nothing in the city since the explosions I wrote about 3 hours ago. So we were hearing that it was getting shellacked, Kharkiv, but maybe not as bad as we were anticipating. There've been blasts in the region, but they imply it was the city being hit. Now, I was thinking that last night was going to be a terrible night for the Ukrainians because of what Trump said on Truth Social. So he did this massive pivot, and it's been incredibly newsworthy. And I thought the Russians would have gone to town. I don't know that they did go to town on Ukraine. Zaporizhzhia, yet again, targeted horrifically. Actually, much of that was done during the daytime yesterday. Explosion was around 2 a.m, though. In this case, it was as if the roof was lifted up and then lowered. I didn't think that at such an age I would have to experience this, said 82-year-old Yuri Babak about the Russian bomb attack on Zaporizhzhia. Russian forces struck Zaporizhzhia in southern Ukraine twice during the night using FAB high explosive aerial bombs. Dozens of homes, cars, and a botanical garden were damaged. The strike marks the 3rd consecutive night of serious attacks on Zaporizhzhia. The Ukrainians are going to have to take out those airplanes somehow because they are absolutely battering Zaporizhzhia. But it's not just these guided glide bombs. This was what was witnessed yesterday, and this is, scary stuff in this city. Now, I'm going to not play the sound of the explosion, but there was a sound of the terminal phase of that Shahid-type drone smacking into Zaporizhzhia there. We had almost simultaneous strikes by 3 Russian jet-powered drones on Zaporizhzhia. We also saw this yesterday. Hell in Zaporizhzhia. The Russians hit the city 5 times. Cars are burning, buildings are damaged. The city is in smoke and fire. It's just really horrendous there yesterday. the Russians are completely going for Zaporizhzhia. That said, I think the Ukrainians probably had the better of the night. So Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat refinery in Bashkiria, 1,500 kilometers from Ukraine, was hit again this morning. It has been hit previously. Same facility was targeted about a week ago. It has a capacity of 10 million metric tons of oil annually and produces more than 150 petroleum and chemical products. So this produces gasoline, diesel, all sorts of stuff. And it was on fire in multiple places. So, you can see that there are multiple places from different images that we have of this. So this is where Salavat is in Bashkortostan. Several smoke plumes can be seen above the oil facility. So it looks like there are 3 places that have been hit in that facility, which I think is bad news for the Russians. Lots of imagery coming out from there. We have in the background from that CCTV camera, all sorts of imagery showing that is in trouble. Now, this time, strike on the ELOU AVT6, previously hit by the AVT4 was previously hit in Salavat. Now we've got the AVT6 facility is designed for 6 million tons of raw materials per year. The AVT6 in Salavat is the most powerful primary oil refining facility at the plant. So it has been struck, and there appears to be a lot of trouble there at Salavat. So that's one thing. Then we hear that the Zenzavatka oil pumping station in Volgograd is on fire again. According to firm's data, a facility part of the Transneft's Volga pipeline network was already attacked on September the 20th. Today's fire suggests a fresh impact. And actually, it's not just there. There was another one at the Kuzmichi 1 oil pumping station. Both of these were targeted. I don't know where that second one, the Kuzmichi, is, but the first one was in Volgograd. Then we hear that a railway station area in Valuki in the Belgorod region was hit. A large fire, it looks like, there. The Russians were claiming it was near the station, not at the station. Local officials only say it's near the tracks, but I don't know. It looks pretty significant to me. That was in Belgorod overnight. Then there was another hit in Rostov. In fact, probably more than one. A missile alert was issued for Taganrog. The local channels report 4 big explosions there. All the videos are blurred. However, Supernova found this. The mayor says air defense is working, but I don't know if that's too accurate. So Taganrog was definitely targeted. Explosions reported in the city centre there. Traffic was partially blocked. It's being reported the airport was targeted. We also have that possibly same incident coming from different direction here. A lot of explosions happening in Russia and occupied territories. That looks like air defense working above Taganrog there. Unsurprisingly, frightened locals there. But also during the daytime yesterday, Donetsk was hit, or Horlivka, occupied Horlivka, a town in Donetsk Oblast, was hit. Big explosion rocked Horlivka. No comment from Russia. Don't know what was hit there, but that definitely looks significant. So, as I say, the Ukrainians really going to town. Kursk was also hit. Lugov, I've talked about Lugov previously. It's one of these places like Rilsk, like Koronovo, where the Russians have accumulated troops and equipment and have command posts as well. And this is sorts of places like this. You've seen a lot of officers get killed. 155th was decimated in Koronovo, and then previously during the Kursk attacks by the Ukrainians into Kursk, Rilsk was just routinely battered, and there were lots of officers and high-ranking officials killed there. And Lugov similarly. Well, Lugov was hit last night, and there apparently were multiple explosions there. I forget how many. Someone else was reporting, was it 14 explosions or something? A lot of explosions here. It looks like a substation at least has been hit, but possibly more in Lugov. But we haven't finished yet, because we hear that, although this was not last night, but I think the night before, Russia's Astrakhan gas processing plant, run by Gazprom, or itself already in trouble, halted fuel production after a Ukrainian drone strike caused a fire. According to Reuters, a condensate unit that produces 3 million tons a year in capacity, or has a capacity of 3 million tons, was hit, suspending gasoline and diesel output. We're going to talk more about Russia really suffering for diesel and gasoline in the last section. Repairs may take weeks or months, so that has stopped operating. Indeed, we hear 3 million tons a year, 11.1 million litres or 2.9 million gallons a day pumps through there. It's diesel and gasoline production facility, Astrakhan gas processing plant. So that is shut down. That's going to hurt the Russians. Then we hear that the Ukrainians had notable successes. This is from a couple of nights ago, but just to give you some detail, the 2 aircraft at the Kacha airfield were destroyed. Those are the 2 that are now on the general staff list this morning. Linear Production Dispatch Station 8N in the Naitopovichi district in Bryansk was hit. This 2 nights ago again. Ukraine's general staff claims notable success there, and also Samara, repeated hits on a linear production dispatch station called Samara. So success was had. Indeed, we are seeing some emerging satellite imagery of destruction. OSINTers looking at, I mean, this is the AGPZ hit on the 21st, I presume so, 3 nights ago. Exile Nova says 2 locations here were hit at this facility, production line of the GPP power plant, and a gas power plant, and a building on the territory of production 1, which is probably also involved in production processes. So, I mean, I don't know the details here. The enterprise may partially stop work or have significant disruptions in fuel supply, which will exacerbate the fuel crisis in the Russian Federation. These are massive areas, and I've wondered previously, like, when you take out, albeit small areas of a massive process plant, what actually, can you stop a whole system by taking out small parts of it? You don't have to necessarily destroy this whole plant here in order to stop it working. So if the final output is contingent upon all of these different processes going on, then you only need to knock out one process for it to stop, arguably, conceptually. But there might be multiple parallel processes, like you might have 6 different ones of these units feeding into the larger thing. So if you take out one unit, then the other 5 are still working to bring that process on. So it just depends what does get hit, I guess. Now, talking about these drones, these medium-range drones, here is another video of an FP2 kamikaze drone launching from a mobile launcher. Using a mobile launcher should significantly speed up the time required for launch preparation. Now, I'm sure I've seen that part of the image before, although they're all going to look fairly similar because you've got the same drone taking off from the same kind of launcher. But I don't think I've seen that, but maybe I have. So this might not be recent, but this is the FP2 supposedly, which is, it has this booster to get it off the ground essentially, and I think that then drops and then it goes on to do its thing. That appears to be one of the drones that they are using very effectively at the moment. Now, just moving on slightly. Actually, we'll come to that last. The air assault on Moscow. So Moscow was then attacked not last night, but the night before and in the evening before that. And I was talking in my analyses about how I don't think they would have had much success in Moscow because it's just absolutely covered in their top range air defense systems. But what it means is by the supposedly 44 drones were downed. So the Ukrainians are obviously hoping to get through, I would have thought, in Moscow to target something there. There's going to be an awful lot to target. But even if they don't get anything through and the Russians consistently are taking out 100% of the Ukrainian drones sent there, it will cause psychological impact. It will get the Russians to use up very precious air defense missiles, interceptors that are going to be costly. But also it stops them from removing air defense systems from Moscow because Ukraine is telling Moscow that they can attack Moscow, and they are attacking Moscow. So it forces the Russians to keep their air defenses there when they are needed in Crimea, for example. So they've decimated Crimea and they're continuing to do so. And the Russians would like to get, I'm sure, air defense units back down there to fill in the gaps, but they have to rob Peter to pay Paul, and the Peter here would be Moscow. So they have to take air defenses and radars from Moscow to then put them down in Crimea, but they can't do that because Ukraine is now saying we can hit Moscow and we are going to try and hit Moscow. So it forces Russia to keep their air defense units in position, which then just allows Ukraine to have free reign in taking out stuff in occupied territories such as Crimea. Now, we then heard this yesterday, that the Ukrainians in their attacks on Moscow were actually using balloons carrying something. So there is an explosive device on a balloon hangars. Do not approach it under any circumstances if you find one, says some source on Russian social media. Immediately call 112 or the nearest police station if possible. Cordon off the site of the fall. A Republic of Tatarstan in your direction from the Nizhny Novgorod region. Fixation of balls with a suspended explosive object. So these were flying into, I had heard Moscow region, but also evidently elsewhere, Nizhny Novgorod and Tatarstan, which is an awful long way away. Ukraine uses balloons to confuse Russian air defenses during drone attacks on Moscow and Tatarstan, says United 24. So they are using not just drones. They are trying to, I guess, use cheaper things and missiles, cheaper things to attract air defenses, to confuse radar and panic and so on and so forth. Now, as Tatarigami surmises, Ukrainians keep hitting Russia's oil sector, striking one refinery and 2 pumping stations this morning alone. Since August, there have been more than 30 hits on refineries and depots. Desertion rates have doubled, and Z influencers are unhappy. Russia's situation will get worse. And just another one, Poland and Estonia welcome Trump's calls to shoot down Russian jets. So roger that. Trump said an awful lot of stuff last night, some of it complete batshit crazy nonsense, like he said in front of the UN leaders. But then he went away and had a meeting with Zelenskyy and had a meeting with Macron and seemed to just completely pivot. And in this time period, a Truth Social post was released. I say was released because I don't think he wrote it, and I'd argue it was impossible that he wrote it because A, the language is beyond him, and B, he was in meetings. So he went from a speech, then to a meeting, then to another meeting, and then after the French meeting, the meeting with Macron, he said, "As you will have seen the statement that I made, or something to that effect," which was like, "Yeah, it was released on my behalf," type thing. But anyway, he also was asked whether NATO should be able to shoot down Russian threats, and he said yes. And then he was asked whether the US would support in that, as in, I guess, with US planes and whatnot. And he said it depends on the context. But actually, that's really good. That's a support for NATO to shoot down Russian planes. So the endorsements came amid the tension in NATO's eastern flank following a series of airspace breaches, which have challenged alliance protocols on intercepts, escalation and collective defence. Now, Mark Rutte from NATO said, Secretary General said, actually, it was the right thing to do to escort those jets away when it happened over Estonia. It wasn't necessary that we shot the drones down, which sounds a bit like a bit of a weaker response. But then he said, but if it comes to it, we don't have a problem doing that type thing. That wasn't the exact words, but you've basically had Sikorsky from Poland saying, yeah, we're going to shoot down Russian jets and drones effectively if they come into our airspace. We might think twice if it's not over our airspace, but over our Petro-Baltic oil platform, for example, where you had 2 jets low fly over that. Okay, that's international waters. We might shoot them down there, but we have no compunction doing it over Polish airspace. You've got Trump saying, yep, that's fine. You've got Rutte saying it was right that they weren't shot down here, but we don't have a problem with it. So I think you're now seeing a shift in rhetoric and positioning from NATO, which I think is very positive for Ukraine. Okay, now on to other bits and pieces. Whew. Okay, Ukrainian kindergarten guard has been sentenced to 15 years for guiding Russian strikes on civilians. I don't always report these. These happen very frequently, but I'm going to report 2 just to remind you that these happen frequently, right? Russian intelligence recruited a Ukrainian through a church choir member who fled to occupied territory, creating a spy network that coordinated strikes on Zaporizhzhia. Then we have a spoon detained another FSB agent in Kherson. He turned out to be a 26-year-old medic from a city hospital recruited by the enemy who coordinated Russian airstrikes on the regional centre. The main targets were reserve command posts, logistics depots, air defence combat positions and checkpoints. So how many of these are being arrested on a daily basis? I don't know, but this is a problem that Ukraine faces. Of course, there are many pro-Russian collaborators that are really upending Ukraine's efforts to fight Russia. Now, Ukraine has hacked a Crimean proxy head and has uncovered child abduction files, according to Ukrainian intelligence. The breach allegedly exposed official correspondence of the head of the Russian occupation authorities in Crimea, Sergei Aksyonov, as well as internal documents and communications between occupation ministries and services. So good news there. We also hear, and I think I reported this previously or a similar one, but Lviv mayor says he found a bug in his office after meetings with top Ukrainian officials. Lviv mayor Andriy Sadovyi, so I presume this is coming from internal security services in Ukraine, said on September the 17th that a bug had been discovered inside one of the phones on his desk, specifically in his phone's charging stand, which also served as a holder. Actually, the last one I heard was in a satellite phone that was stopping working. So actually, this might be a different one. Interesting that several people appear to have found listening devices inside Ukraine. Right, then we have, I'm not going to go through it in any great detail, just a few things subsequent to Freudian slip, Trump's pivotal adjustment of position. He has turned on a sixpence, Putin, as according to his Truth Social post. Go and watch my breaking news, my previous video, if you want to see what he wrote. It was staggering. I think my video thumbnail was just Trump's stunning pivot on Ukraine! ! It was jaw-dropping what Trump said. And he is basically saying Ukraine can now take back all of their land up to in their original form, and maybe even go further. He was even advocating taking Russian territory. I mean, it was mind-boggling in how much he's just shifted. Now, let's look a little bit and very quickly at some of the elements surrounding this. Zelenskyy came out afterwards. So you had Trump. It was really weird. You had Trump saying his speech in the UN, which was bonkers and didn't reference any of this positioning at all, and was very similar to what we've heard previously, which is, we will put sanctions on Russia if you all of you European nations do, and you're all here listening, you all need to put sanctions on Russia, then we'll follow suit. And then he had a meeting with Zelenskyy, and then he had a meeting with Macron. And in between, I think, the meeting of Zelenskyy and Macron, this statement came out from Trump that completely blew everything out of the water, where he's like, we're going to sell weapons to NATO. They can do what they want with those weapons. And Ukraine, I think, are in a position to win this war. And he's win, all caps, win the war, take all their territory back to original form, and they go further. And then he said, Russia's in a terrible position. He said they're economically in a terrible position, and they're fighting aimlessly for all this time, and blah, blah, blah. And absolutely goes to town on Russia and completely bigs up Ukraine. And it was just insane. Very great to hear, though. I'm grateful to Trump, said Zelenskyy. I cannot share the details right now. Trump possesses very important information regarding the situation at the front. Right, so at the beginning of this message, he also said, due to the fact I've just found out what's essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially said, I now know what's going on in the war, Ukraine can win this, which is what I would say implicit, but actually a pretty explicit acceptance that he didn't know what was going on before. I talk about Trump's ignorance all the time. I talk about the fact he doesn't take intelligence briefings. I think there's a disconnect between the Pentagon and the White House. Maybe that disconnect has been reconnected, so that the White House is now actually getting accurate information both from the Pentagon and from Ukraine, because before he was just getting information from the Kremlin, and that was what he was basing his decisions on. Trump always backs a winner, and I think he suddenly is now realizing that Russia can't win this, that their economy is tanking and they're militarily in a lot of trouble. So he's now backing Ukraine, but also possibly is providing himself an off-ramp from helping at all in any kind of diplomatic way. He's now saying Ukraine can go and win this, and with the European Union's help, they can go. That's what he said. Ukraine can go and win this. In other words, we're going to sit back, we're going to sell NATO weapons, we're going to sell Ukraine these weapons, but we're not really going to be involved in doing any more diplomacy. It's the end of the road for us. See you later, is one way of interpreting that. Now, Zelenskyy, and this is so important, he said now he trusts me much more than Putin. You know, Trump trusts Kiev more than Kremlin. And there was these admissions from Trump that he really, doesn't trust Putin anymore, that Putin wasn't the person he thought he was, etc., etc. A bunch of comments that he made, Trump, in the Q&As and whatnot. So it's very clear that he's shifted, at least for the time being. He's only as good as his last 10 minutes, and these are words, they're not actions. But I don't think you're going to get huge actions other than Trump actually moving away from helping and mediate, which means now it's back to doing war, and war then forcing people to the negotiating table. So then it needs to be a case of Ukraine being in such an advantageous situation that Russia's forced to the negotiating table, and that's where the European Union come in and NATO allies come in. If not the US explicitly, they will supply, they will sell equipment to Ukraine to be able to fight themselves into the winning position at the negotiating table. So Zelenskyy said on Fox News, then went on to Fox News, Trump understands that we cannot just swap territories. We can't give up these territories. So now Trump is understanding that they need to win back those territories. And he's saying, I think they can win them. It's just massively different. Anyway, I think his position has changed, says Zelenskyy. And it appears to be the case. He also said that Iran will never be on our side. Zelenskyy said this. India is mostly with us. That's interesting. That's what he thinks. I think Trump can change Xi Jinping's attitude toward the war in Ukraine. Wow. So he's hopeful that China might be shifted in their positioning by, one would assume, a lot of pressure. It's a carrot or a stick, maybe a carrot and a stick for China there. Now, the Telegraph interprets this in completely the other way, but actually kind of what I was saying, that this is the off-ramp for Trump, but sees the off-ramp as a bad thing. So Telegraph reports, bad news for Zelenskyy, Trump is out of the Ukraine war. Others are, I'm not so sure that's bad. If he's still supporting Ukraine, this is the first time we've seen him or heard him actively support Ukraine, saying effectively he wants Ukraine to win. So I think that's really positive, and it means that he won't get in the way of Trump, of Ukraine winning, possibly. So I wouldn't be so negative here. What may at first glance seem like a U-turn may actually be bad news for Zelenskyy, instead of promising new support for Ukraine. But I don't think they were in a position to do that. They are in a position to do that. They could do that. But I don't think Trump was ever going to then turn around and say, let's give a load of presidential drawdown authority equipment. Let's just pack a load of HIMARS missiles and Patriot missiles onto a boat and just send it with goodwill to Ukraine. That's not going to happen. He's going to sell it. And I think that's the most we can expect at the moment. So instead of promising new support for Ukraine or stepping up action against Russia, I mean, the key is action against Russia from a sanctions point of view. Trump seems to be handing everything over to Europe and NATO. I think that's true, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. There is no hint of additional support, I don't think there would be, for Ukraine, or that he will punish Moscow even more. His only commitment is to continue selling weapons to allies. It is unlikely to change the rules of the game. Well, you may start seeing Tomahawks go. You may start seeing the US being fine with Ukraine hitting deep into Russia, although they seem to be fine with that because that's been happening routinely anyway. Now, Russia's response to this was possibly to strike Kharkiv quite a lot last night. But then Peskov came out because in that message, Trump called Russia's army a paper tiger. And of course, that's kind of what you'd say maybe with China being the tiger, you'd talk about a bear with Russia. So Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for the Kremlin, said this is war and we're in the sharpest phase. It's fate defining and we must win it for our children. Russia isn't a paper tiger, we're a bear and there are no paper bears. So, that's his response. He added that Putin is ready to meet Zelenskyy, but without preparation, it's just a PR stunt, he said. So, kicking that off into the long weeds. Now, due to what Trump said last night, the Russian stock market has absolutely tanked, sharply turning red amid statements by both Zelenskyy and Trump. Crap is coming, says this pro-Ukrainian source. Now, to add to that, the last OECD Russian industry confidence data shows that Russian business and industry confidence has plunged and is only just above the three crises of 1992. So, coming out of communism and then going south, the 2008 tech bubble burst and 2020 pandemic crises. So it's only just above that. Its trajectory appears to be downwards, suggesting that internally Russia is fast reaching its worst period ever. So here are some bad periods. So we've got the 1992 period there where, it was bad. And then you have here 2008 and then here 2020. And then now we're getting pretty damned low. This is the fourth worst, but the trajectory is not looking good. At least in the last crisis, it had its oil and gas exports to prop up the economy, but that's no longer anywhere near true. Right, then you have major banks have begun to reset credit card limits, reducing those credit card limits without warning. Complaints from customers of ETB, Pochta Bank and Renaissance Bank indicate the limits are being reset suddenly without prior notice or explanation. In some cases, cards were blocked after the limit was changed, making it difficult to pay even everyday expenses despite complying with all the bank's terms. Banks explain the limit reduction by the need to align financial indicators and reduce reserves, funds that are not actually used. According to Freedom Finance Global analyst Vladimir Chernov, this is being done to reduce the risk of the shortage of funds as overdue debt increases. Experts note that these measures particularly affect financially literate clients who are actively using credit cards to repay their debts during the interest-free period. Elman Maktiev, CEO of Association for the Development of Financial Literacy, emphasised that such borrowers are essentially using the bank's funds for free, while banks attract funds on the market at an average annual interest rate of 14%. This makes reliable clients economically unprofitable for financial institutions. So they're starting to close down on that. We are seeing that debt repayment, bad debt is increasing as people are struggling to repay debts at the moment. Loan repayment defaults are going up. And then since February, Russia has destroyed about 42% of that should have been back at the beginning. Sorry, to add to this, not to add to this. On the other hand, Ukraine is also struggling in terms of oil and gas production. 42% of Ukraine's daily gas production capacity has been hit. This summer, the oil refining industry was completely destroyed, according to Naftogaz CEO. So that's a real problem for Ukraine as well. But anyway, we were on Russia. So we are seeing gas stations in Crimea have no gas there apart from one particular product out of the 6 on show here, 3 out of the 6, and those prices are going up. Here there's only one product there as well, so that's Crimea in trouble. Now it's getting serious when it hits Moscow. So Ukrainian sanctions, Russia's fuel shortage is now hitting Moscow, the suburbs, and even Leningrad Oblast, so St. Petersburg. Lukoil has started banning canister sales at some stations, and businesses are reporting restrictions across the region. This fuel problem is becoming more and more widespread. And then just some of the latest ones here. In several districts in the Belgorod region, gas stations only offer A100 gasoline and diesel. Subscribers also report fuel problems in Nizhny Novgorod and Samara. It will be very epic if for the 4th year of the war, we still can't destroy the energy of the Ukrainians, but they can destroy ours. No report saying Russian channels getting increasingly frustrated with the fuel shortages. And then we have here, Russian media report that in Russia's Nizhny Novgorod region, school buses did not run due to gasoline shortage. It's reported that private gas stations have been without gasoline for 2 to 3 weeks already. 67% of gas stations in Russia are privately owned, and they cover a vast part of the country. It is a problem. To add insult to injury, 7,000 trucks are stuck in Kazakhstan en route to Moscow. They're transporting goods from China and have been waiting for quite a while. Previously, reports indicated 5,000 stranded trucks, but the situation continues to worsen. The exact causes of the massive congestion and the time frame for its resolution have not been officially announced. So why is that? Are they checking those trucks? Is it that Kazakhstan has closed the border? I don't know. But 7,000 trucks delivering stuff to Russia, according to I think is that the Moscow Times, just is not good news for Russia. Now, Ukraine's Foreign Office spokesman has slammed China for a gross violation of international law and legislation of Ukraine. That's concerning the revelations of the container ship Hengyang 9 that was concealed in its location. I reported this yesterday. It turned off its transporters, and it looked to have put transponders on another ship, and then went to Sevastopol, which is illegal, picked up some stuff, then came back and rejoined its route, and the transponder then suddenly aligned with where it was, where the transponder, so satellite was saying it's in Sevastopol, its transponder said it was over there, and then it was all like really dodgy. So anyway, Ukraine's foreign office spokesman has gone to town there on China for a big violation. And I'm going to end with a positive here. A 72-year-old combat medic, Tetiana Godmother, Tepliuk, survived Azovstal. So Azovstal was the steelworks down in Mariupol where the Marines held out for ages, and Azov. Then months in Russian prisons, starved, beaten, forced to sing the anthem of her captors. She lost 30 kilograms, but not her resolve. She was freed on December the 31st, 2022. And since then, she's returned to service with the Azov regiment. And she's 72. So, wow, she survived the siege of Azovstal, Russian prisons, losing all that weight. And then I kept believing that something would change. I did not show despair and told my relatives that I was fine. I shut everything out and focused on my work. I found a cactus at the plant, watered it, and worried that if we left, it would remain there and die. After my liberation, I met Commander Denis Prokopenko, who told me I was needed during rehabilitation. A medical commission assessed my fitness for service. I feared being declared unfit, but the verdict was limited fit. Now I continue to serve in Azov. I treat soldiers from rear units. Absolutely marvellous. Great story. A lot to go through today. Thank you very much for your support. Really appreciate it. I hope this was informative and interesting. It is a bumper one, an hour. I'm sorry it took that long, but my goodness, everything is happening all at once. Take care. Speak soon.